we're going to start with the inspirational piece for today. So like all of you know, whenever we have a session on Girls for Girls, we always have someone come and share her story. So I actually thought that was going to be something the girls were going to say, that they remember that it's a skill to be able to share your story so that you can create a relationship with people. So we are privileged today to have one of our own mentors. I think it was selfish of us to ask Natasha, but Natasha is a special young woman. Her achievements for her age are already phenomenal. A lot of the older mummies sitting in here have not done half of what Natasha has been able to do. So she's going to share a bit of her story. But the reason we have asked her is because she's younger in terms of age, but also Natasha doesn't just talk about what she would like to do in society. She has started acting on society. So for us, Natasha is a perfect example as to how this session 5, which is about running for service or leadership and offering service to your community. She's a perfect example for that. So without much ado, I would like to welcome Natasha, who will tell us a little bit about her story and what it has taken for her to step up to the task and not only talk about what it is she's passionate about, but has actually started doing something that our society is benefiting from. So welcome to Natasha.
Thank you, thank you. I think it's a bit easier with only 6 or 7 mentees, so I don't have to feel nervous or anything. But thanks, guys. It was so weird to get asked to do this, only because it's weird to reflect on your own journey. It's hard. It's interesting. It can be cathartic to a certain degree. But yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity because at the very least, you know, this period of lockdown has been very introspective. So this has been quite an interesting way, I think, for me to reflect on my 35 3/4 years of life. When you're 35, you start counting again in quarters like a child because you don't want to not be a youth anymore. So I'm 35 3/4. And I have 3 more months before I'm no longer eligible to be a youth league president. So, you know, give me 3 months and then we will see. In thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I reflected on my whole life. And it's not a long life, but I mean, it's 3.5 decades. When I was in primary school, I realized that I'm a bit of a natural leader. Actually, it sounds weird, but I am. I remember in 1994, and none of the mentees were alive then, so that's fun. I'm gonna need a lot of you to turn your videos on so that I can see you. It helps me talk. So art of communication. I like seeing people. Yeah, we had to do like a mock election because obviously it was the first time South Africa voted democratically, and we did like a mock presidential election and we had to campaign and we had voting booths and things, and I didn't win, but that's not important for the story I'm trying to tell right now. And then in high school, I found myself in more leadership roles and I really wanted to be head girl. I didn't get to be head girl, but I think part and parcel of wanting to be a leader is also accepting the fact that you may not be elected to be a leader, you know, the disappointment that can accompany that, but not important. I got to varsity, I went to Wits, and found a ragtag group of strangers to run with for SRC elections, and we won, and we were completely non-political, and I think it was one of the first time in Wits's history where they didn't have a politically affiliated group who won an SRC election. We weren't ANC, we weren't DA, we weren't anything. So yeah, I was the deputy president, vice president of Wits's SRC. And that was really cool because it was the first time being a leader that I interacted with very inspirational people. When you sit on the SRC for a university, you get exposed to all the people in the council, in the Senate. So you deal with important leaders, I'm going to call it, in a varsity's leadership circle. And then I realized that despite, all of these leadership roles that in my very limited life that I'd had, I hadn't realized that there's actually one very important thing you need to realize about leadership, that there's leadership and then there's leadership. I loved being a leader. I was 19 when I was the VP for the WITS SRC, and I realized that, and I want to apologize so much to Professor Nancy Kuhn from session 2. I believe you can be born a leader. There are people who have natural leadership abilities. But where I do think Nancy is correct is that just because you're a born leader doesn't mean that you're a good leader. It doesn't mean that you're an ethical leader. It doesn't mean that you're an effective leader, actually. So that's why I say there's leadership and then there's leadership, And I realized at WITS that I like being a leader because I like being in power. And I'm going to tell you a very honest story because all I can be is honest about my leadership journey. But I like being in power because I liked the prestige associated with being in power. I liked that. As a result, your place in society is that much more important and influential, and you feel listened to and heard, and you feel like your opinion matters, But then when I was done with varsity, something so weird happened. It all fell away, and I was very lost all of a sudden in my life, which I'd never been before. My mom likes to use this saying, and thankfully she's not on this call today, but because she's quite a weird lady, but she likes to say, you're a fart in a hurricane. So, and it basically means that you're just blowing all over the place. And that's how I felt suddenly for the first time in my life, that I had no purpose. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to achieve. And I was just blowing higgledy-piggledy all over the place. And I tried so many jobs in different and vastly different industries. I worked in fashion departments at magazines. I worked in events management, doing like varsity campus promotions. And then I even went to live on a farm. I milked some cows, not for payment, for farm life. Collected some eggs. It was weird, but I loved it. I loved it. I'm a born city girl, but I loved milking a cow. It's very weird. And I loved collecting eggs. And I loved the simplicity suddenly that my life had become. And then I even worked on a rhino conservation project for the Department of Environmental Affairs. And that was very cool. I can't lie, but now there's like 2 rhinos left in the world because humans are terrible. So yeah, that didn't really work out. But then I was offered a job at the Oliver Adelaide Tambo Foundation. And my job was, back then, basically running the day-to-day operations of the foundation. And it was incredible because people who knew and worked with Oliver and Adelaide Tambo are very important people traditionally deemed in society. It's Frini Janwala, it's Thabo Mbeki, it's real leaders, like actual political leaders of society. And I loved being around them. I loved learning. I was completely gobsmacked that I got the opportunity, and still do, to talk to these people. But I realized that every day I spend hours, still to this day, talking about Oliver Tambo, but nobody ever really spoke about Adelaide at all. And when they did, she was just reduced to the wife of Oliver Tambo. And no one cared to change really that narrative at all. And Adelaide, when I learned about Adelaide, was the president of her ANC branch at 18. She convinced Oliver Tambo, who was then the Secretary General of the ANC, to come and talk at her branch of the ANC. She, when they went into exile, held down 3 different jobs just to take care of her family, because Oliver was going around the world trying to convince people to not support an apartheid government. And Adelaide held down the entire home front. She worked these many jobs. She raised her 3 children, and then she raised all these other children who just showed up on her doorstep in exile because they couldn't go back home. They couldn't come back to South Africa. She did all these things while Oliver was doing, yes, very important work, but it is a disgrace that her legacy then gets boiled down to the wife of Oliver Tambo. And suddenly I knew that my world wasn't the same anymore. And what I cared about the most was women, and specifically Black women. I'm unapologetically a feminist, and especially advocating for the equal and fair treatment of Black women. Our roles in life, and by Black I mean the umbrella term, Black, Indian, colored, etc. Our roles are reduced constantly to in relation to the men in our life, which I find disgusting. There's nothing wrong with being a mother, a wife, or whatever, but that's not all women are, ever. So I realized that society doesn't really want women, or specifically Black women, to have a place. And then what was the alternative? We'd have to make a place for ourselves. Black women have been dealt the rawest hand that I think we can be dealt in society, in the world, for a number of reasons, which I'm pretty sure we're all very aware of. And I had to ask myself, what was I going to do about it? So I decided, I think, to change the world. And it sounds pompous and it sounds arrogant, but here's the thing. Your world is, yes, the almost 8 billion of us. That's the world. But your world is a very different thing. Your world is the portion of the world that you influence. It's the portion of the world that matters to you, that cares about you, that you want to change. So through my work at the foundation, I developed projects about women. All I wanted to do, and all I still want to do, is try and improve the lives and the quality of life for young Black women. Remove the obstacles that I can remove, etc. My favorite foundation project happened so accidentally. My mom and her best friend started this line that I'm wearing. Tell her if you see her that I wore it, of white shirts, and it's called CC. And it's called CC because, you know, CC means sister, obviously, but it's also called CC because that's how they address each other, which, because she's not on this call, I'll tell you now, can be a bit annoying, but it's cute, you know, whatever. And for the first CC collection in 2016, I had been reading so much about how girls miss school in South Africa because they don't have enough money to buy sanitary towels, which is, it's so far past ridiculous. I actually don't know the word for it. How in this age are girls missing school because they don't have pads, when every girl in this world of a certain age has a period every month? It's something we cannot control. It happens, and yet, you know, there are girls in rural communities who have to use leaves or newspapers or fashion some sort of sanitary towel-esque thing out of old t-shirts or whatever it is. So I'd been reading a lot about that. And then I asked the CCs if I could make an entrance fee to their pop-up shop of a sanitary pack, 1 packet of sanitary towels per person for anyone who came to look at shirts, buy shirts or whatever. And by the end of the collection, we'd raised hundreds of packets, and it was incredible. I didn't expect it. I didn't even have a plan for what I was going to do with these pads when I collected, and suddenly there were so many. And a few months later, I was going down to the Eastern Cape to a tiny village called Nkantolo, and it is where Oliver Tambo was born. And I took all these pads with me. I had hand luggage, which was my clothes for the time I was there. And the luggage I checked in with these sanitary pads. There were so many of them. And I got to this first school that I went to, and I gave them all these pads, and they were so, so grateful. And then I realized I needed to turn this into a mandate of the foundation. It needed to become a whole project, because girls can't have an inferior level of education over something that they can't control, you know? You're missing school, you don't know half the curriculum, because every month you're going through this, every single month. But how do you then catch up when you're constantly missing school over something you can't control? And since then, we've expanded the project to include dignity packs, which include like underwear and roll-on and face cloths and soap and whatever it is. And now we've included water in it, because there's no running water in this village. And we're in the middle of a pandemic where your biggest line of defense is washing your hands. How are you washing your hands if you don't have access to running water? So that's how the project has thankfully grown, and we're busy raising funds for that. And while that was happening, a friend of mine, Tambi, a very good friend of mine, came back from America and wanted to bring a book for her niece, who was 2, about women. And she was like, do you know, there's so few books written about women, and there are no books for children written about South African women. It barely exists. And the liberation movement, South Africa today wouldn't be what it is without women. The world today wouldn't be. Why do we have no women stories accessible for children? And because I have incredible friends, we wrote a book, and you saw the cover just now. And we're all so passionate about the feminist agenda that we try to be as inclusive as possible. We found a Black female publisher. We found a Black authoress, I hate that word, Black female author, who could help us edit the book. We got young Black female illustrators. Some of them actually came from Afro Girls, now that I remember, who helped illustrate some of the portraits of the women in the books. And we launched our book in 2018 at a Black-owned bookstore. Everything was very deliberate. Everything was to push the agenda we wanted to push. Hi, Val. Welcome back. Nice to see you. Earlier I said there's leadership, and then there's leadership. And I now realize that while I used to enjoy the prestige of leadership, what I actually enjoy is being able to effect change. When I feel strongly about something, I like to use my natural talent and my positions and my ability to improve the lives of others. It's what I was put on this earth to do. And power is fun, as I'm sure many people can tell you. But what you do with your power, I think, is the most important thing. I've been watching over the past few months how different countries have handled the COVID crisis. And it's been so interesting to see that the best reactions and the best actions in dealing with COVID have been by female-led countries. It's been Taiwan, it's been Denmark, it's been New Zealand. They've been the most flexible in their approach to COVID. They've thought out the box and used influences and used technology and used all these different mechanisms because they're women. And when women lead, we don't just lead to be leaders. We have a whole skill set that we don't value enough because society tells us that we're not good leaders, but we're the best leaders. And I'm in no way politically inclined, but leading or serving, and those two things you have to know are the same things. It is important to understand how to play the game of politics in getting what you want. So you don't have to be political, but understand that in leading, politicking comes into it. And while I don't necessarily agree with, what is his name, Steve, the man in the video that we watched today, I don't necessarily agree with everything he said. I do believe that people believe you when you believe in yourself. Leading doesn't only mean being the president or being the mayor or head of the UN or whatever. You can lead in your own little circle, like I said earlier, your family, your friendship circle, your church, your school, your community. But it is so important to remember that leading comes with responsibility. You lead to serve. You can lead, and leading sounds like the connotation is that you're at the front, but actually, when you lead, you are at the back pushing your people, the people you're trying to influence, that agenda forward. For me, leading is figuring out what you enjoy doing, what you want to change, how you want to use your natural talents to affect those change. It may not have been blatantly clear throughout what I've been saying, but every lesson that you guys have learned from G4G is every lesson that got me to this point in my life, in my career. If you listened carefully, I have an incredible village that I rely on all the time, some of whom may or may not be in this call, but I'm not naming names. My village pushes me when I need to be pushed. They challenge me when I need to be challenged. They cheerlead for me. They support me. And they are a resource to rely on. And my village is made up of very strong women, but it's also made up, I've realized, of male allies. And this comes into play when you're trying to play the game of getting your agenda across. Because traditionally, men have more power, so you need to have strong male allies in order to negotiate your way into getting what you want. Make use of those resources that you have. Sometimes we can't do this thing alone. You need a village. So your village should be as diverse and as powerful as it can be. I found my purpose, as I've told you, which is helping others. My mom, bless her soul, always says to me, don't you want, well, pre-COVID, don't you want to live overseas? Don't you want to leave South Africa? Don't you want to, not be here? South Africa isn't very stable. I just want the best for you. And she means it so lovingly. And I always say to her, if I leave, and if we all leave, who stays and fights? Who changes South Africa's trajectory? Who then makes this country into what I think we all know and believe it can be? Shem. I love my mom, Shem. Don't tell her, but I do love her. She's very smart, but don't tell her. I learned that insufficient representation of women and the obstacles that we still face as women and young people today is what makes me the angriest. It's what boils my blood. And I think that's how I found my purpose. It's about what gets your blood boiling or what makes your adrenaline rush. That's how I found, because I didn't always know, like I told you, that's how I found that I kept getting angry that where are the women on this panel? Where are the women in these leadership roles? And then suddenly I was like, oh, it's women. It's women that I care the most about. I feel passionate enough, I hope you can tell, that I communicate effectively in getting my agenda across, which comes from the art of communication, obviously. And I think that when you are passionate, like Steve Harding, I think that's his name, the guy today. Steve. When you are passionate, thanks. That dude who was talking, that Oprah in the video, he said, when you feel as passionately as you can't help but come across as authentic and sincere in what you're trying to say. And that's palpable to your audience. They can feel it. Even if you're not confident about what you're saying because you're scared of speaking or whatever it is, that sincerity comes through as confidence. And it's infectious, really. If you think about the people you love listening to the most, you don't know if they're faking their confidence or not, but what comes across is that they truly believe in what they believe in. Like I told you about negotiation, having male allies has helped me a lot. But I advocate daily for the change I want to see in the world. It involves obviously playing a negotiation game. It involves picking my battles a lot of the time. Some things just aren't worth fighting over. And sometimes that means not dressing too colorfully or putting on a bit less perfume than you usually would, or not wearing as many rings, or sadly hiding your tattoos like I've had to do, or just to play the game. But it's because what you're trying to achieve is bigger than, you know, you having all your piercings out at that moment, because sadly we do live in quite a conservative little world. But it's about playing the game. And once you know how to play the game, you can achieve what you want, and then nobody's going to care that you have purple hair with, you know, a piercing from your nose to your belly button to your toe. Nobody will care because you've achieved what you needed to achieve. I think ultimately game playing is about getting what you want. And then finally, today's session, which we're about to talk about, is having the courage to use all you've learned in G4G, all 5 sessions up to now, 4 and a bit, to effect the change that you want. Women are remarkable leaders. We are complex and so multifaceted and play so many different roles in society. It's actually a shame that there aren't more female leaders, because we're more empathetic, we're more flexible, we're more courageous, we're better multitaskers, all these wonderful things that make us really effective leaders and will make you all very great leaders. Using the gifts you have, the natural abilities, regardless of how big or small the opportunity is, don't wait for things to change. I mean, we all complain. Complaining is a normal thing. Complain until you're blue in the face. But complaining isn't going to really change anything. You have to, and it's so cliched, and I'm ashamed of myself for even saying it, but you have to be the change you want to see in the world. Speak up against wrongdoing. Speak up against bad things you see in the world. Fight for the things you believe in. Be what you want the world to be. I feel like Miss Universe. I hope you're all taking me seriously. Be what you want the world to look like. You guys, all 6, 7 of you here, and actually all the mentors, you're all capable, I promise you, all capable of leading in whichever way, big or small it is. So be a leader, not for power, not for the wrong reason. Be a leader for people, and be a leader for purpose. So thanks for listening to me and my journey.
Wow. Can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Yes.
Wow. Welcome back.
I just please. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone now, so please excuse me if my technological capabilities are a little bit less than what they should be. But Natasha, that was absolutely amazing. I came in, unfortunately, I didn't listen too much. I cannot believe how well you completely encompassed everything that this session is about, in terms of running your personal journey, in terms of getting to, you know, going through different things, trying different things until that thing came, it finally hit you, you know, that was your thing. I'd now like to ask, does anyone have any questions for Natasha, please, ladies? Anyone have any questions? Girls? Okay, I'm just going to, sorry. Anyone have any questions?
I don't mind.
I don't have a question, but I just, yeah, I just want to commend Natasha for just, you know, I think you took us through just this beautiful journey that that you've traveled. And I think the thing about leadership is you never arrive, and it sounds to me like it continues, right?
Absolutely.
The evidence for that is you started with something so small. You said, you know, why are there no pads for these girls? And suddenly it wasn't just about the pads, and then it was water, and then it was, but the fact that you started. And I think that for all of us, not just the mentees, is the takeaway. And the fact that, you know, sometimes we struggle with, what is my purpose, when it's really staring you in the face? What are you angry about in the world? And how do you then take that anger and direct it constructively to something you can change? So I took away a million nuggets out of what you shared. So your 35 years on the planet have been nothing but wonderful. And three quarters. So I think, you know, regardless of our, you know, different ages in this community, you are testament to what happens when a woman says, enough is enough, I'm going to change something. So thank you so very much for what you do.
That's so kind. Thank you. Thank you.
Natasha, I'd like to ask you, you were talking about your mom saying, you know, what you're doing, where you're going in your life, and that kind of pressure. I mean, I think a lot of us, that community or people around us asking us things, you know, or expecting us to do things. How did you overcome that? How did you overcome that kind of, because that becomes hard sometimes, that judgment from people when you're not following the path they think you should be following.
Sure, I'm so glad Cynthia is not on this call, so I can be really honest. It was hard. It was really hard. My parents had a very clear vision for my life. Obviously, as parents, you know, they want the best for you. They do all these great things. And then I wasn't those things. And it was hard, and it was a point of contention to a large degree. But I think where I'm really grateful is that even in my most lost time, they didn't give up on me. But also I was very clear that I just needed time to figure it out, and it would happen. I needed the space because the pressure of them being like, you must, didn't help it happen any quicker. And they, you know, I was living at home for a bit, and they were like, okay, cool. If you're going to live at home while you figure things out, then you must be active in figuring things out, you know, get a job, get a whatever. And it wasn't easy, and it put a lot of strain on our relationship. But I'm grateful that they eventually, after fighting a lot, sat back and they were like, the only way she's going to figure this out is if we give her the space, because fighting clearly isn't working. It's not going to hurry your purpose along any quicker, or the realization of your purpose any quicker than, you know, your parents being like, be a lawyer, be a lawyer, be a lawyer. Yeah, I studied law, but I don't want to be a lawyer. And I think maybe if I did in like 10 years time, then want to be a lawyer, that would be great. But it's my journey. It's my, you know, my journey to figure out. So it is tricky, and it took a lot of negotiation for, you know, to get the space to figure things out. But yeah, ultimately, yeah, they had to realize, I think we both had to, that it was just going to take time and space. Yeah.
Jabuline's got a lovely question that actually goes into that as well. She asks, how do you deal with people highlighting flaws in your, what's wrong with the ideas you have? Which is a beautiful question. Thanks, Jabuline.
Thanks. I think a lot of what I've learned, and even in watching Steve Harding's video, it takes a lot, but you have to have the confidence to be unapologetically yourself. And that takes a lot of hard work and practice, or maybe it doesn't. For me, it really did. I read the most incredible article this morning from the author Roxane Gay. I don't know if you know, she wrote the book Bad Feminist. And she very overweight, and she was talking about how she had gastric bypass surgery or something like that. And she's saying before she had the surgery, she felt that her world was so small because she was so scared to travel in the world being someone overweight. So she deliberately made her world very small, that she'd just be in New York all the time, because sitting on a plane or walking in different societies that weren't her comfort zone scared her so much because of how she looked in the world. And she got some surgery and she lost some weight. And then even when she wasn't losing weight, she was just like, I can't keep making my world so small, because the world isn't going anywhere. Well, it sort of did with COVID, but the world isn't going anywhere. But I want to see it. I want to experience. She said she'd always wanted to sit at a cafe in Paris. And she was like, I have to just do it. And I think that's how flaws in your plan work. They can hold you back, and you will be judged for it. People will be like, oh, but you were meant to be, or, oh no, this isn't how you get to be, whatever. But I think it's just about believing that even this might not look like a traditional plan, a traditional trajectory. Good God, what a word. You will get there. It is your journey. And comparing your journey to anyone else's journey is an exercise in futility. You will get to where you're meant to be. But me being like, oh, by 27, Kini was a PhD. I know you're not, girl, but you're there almost. Kini was a PhD. Mabata was a plastic surgeon. And by 27, I'm not. I'm still figuring myself out. It's your own journey. It's your own life. So yes, there will be flaws, and yes, people will judge you, but it is your journey. So you can't take that on too much. You have to have the confidence. I wrote somewhere in my notes today, and I know I'm now not going to find it, but yeah, I wrote that you have to have confidence in your journey. Don't take on what others think, to a certain degree. I mean, we're all human. We all live in society, but just be confident that your flaws make up part of your plan. My flaw was moving to Natal, and if I hadn't moved to Natal and milked some cows, I wouldn't have met the person who offered me the job at the foundation, and I wouldn't have found my then purpose. So your flaws are part of your journey, and that is the most long-winded answer, poor Jabulile, to the question that you asked me.
To the people. The other thing Tabahong was asking is, are there any books that you can suggest that people read, or are there any books that are your favorites that you would like to recommend?
Besides my own.
Yes, besides your own. I really like Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. I'm a big fan of Alicia Keys's new book. Actually, I don't remember the name, but it's a wonderful, wonderful depiction of her journey through her life and coming into her own. Like I said, Roxane Gay's book, Bad Feminist. And then I think,
mostly anything by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, with some exceptions. And then Things Fall Apart.
It's one of my favorite books, sorry.
Yeah, I think those are my top books. But you know, books are also for different things. I love the Irish author Marian Keyes, and she just writes the most lovely, shallow in the best way, like chick lit. I hate that stupid name, but the genre is called chick lit, and it's very good for what it is, which is just lovely, easy reading, escapist reading, which shows women in very different ways. Women in abusive relationships, women in powerful positions, women trying to fall pregnant, women leading, women not leading. And I think it's just easy reading that shows the multifacetedness of women. So you don't always have to be reading Ayn Rand or, you know, Nelson Mandela, God bless him, but you can read things, you know, that are fun and still teach you wonderful, wonderful things. And I love rereading books, and I find that when I reread books, I take different things from them every time I do. So yeah, also this book, my favorite book.
Someone is going to be lucky enough to get, right?
Yeah, I'm excited.
I have a question for you, Natasha. If you go back to when you were, you know, that young age, when you say that you started stepping into leadership, yeah, when you were doing the presidential run, I want you to go back to that first point when you started stepping up, before you knew and even that you liked leading.
Yeah.
Can you just share with us what it is what happened in you, what transformed for you to be able to say, today I'm stepping up? Because I think that's where a lot of us get stuck, is that you see the opportunity, or you think, this is where I should be making a change. This is what makes me angry, but we hold back. What is it for you that allowed you to like step into that moment? Because it looks like the moment you did, you started moving up. What is it?
I'm gonna be very, very honest. It was my parents. It's my village. My parents were like, okay, gosh, the only way I really know how to answer questions is really long-winded. I'm so sorry. But my parents, I was the first grandchild on my mom's side and on my dad's side to go to private school. And it was pretty unheard of. You know, we lived in Westbury, and my mom stumbled honestly, accidentally across the school that she's then sent me to. It was a mistake. She was lost. There was no Google Maps. She found the school. She sent me. And then suddenly I was 6 and going to a private school. And I think that legacy, as it has now become, my parents they worked really hard to send me to the schools, and my sister, that we went to. But I think then, I mean, it was 1990 and South Africa was so different. And in order to be a Black kid at a predominantly white school, you have to, and I'm sorry for the reality, I think it's the case even now, 30 years later, you have to be exceptional in order to feel like you belong. You can't just be Black. You have to be a great Black. And that shouldn't be the case, because you have every right to be at the schools that you're at and get a great education. Literally, it's constitutionally enshrined that you have the right to education. But it wasn't the case 30 years ago. And I think my parents really pushed me to be exceptional so that they could show people that Black people have every right to be there that white people do. And I think it's where obviously a lot of the pressure that I felt came from, but it was my parents being like, while we're here, while we have this opportunity, and honestly, we didn't know how long it would last for because the country was in so much political unrest. They were like, you're gonna have to make the most of it, you know, you're gonna have to be the best little black kid this school has ever seen. So I think it was definitely my parents pushing, and then it showed me that I just have a natural okayness for that, you know.
So it's your village. It's your village, and you draw confidence and inspiration from
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
The thing is that when I listen to you, you're very clear as to who is in your village. You also are very clear how to use your village.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I mean, it's a lot older.
There's also an element of overcoming adversity. I mean, you actually you were doing things that you weren't anticipating having to deal with. So there's that also overcoming those challenges as well that helped you develop and grow.
It is. And I think, you know, now in the last few weeks, we've seen so many people talking up against racism in independent schools around the country. And I sit on my high school's Old Girls Association. And it is devastating to see that the racism has actually just increased since I left, as opposed to decreasing. You know, one would think as more and more Black people went to the school that it would decrease, but it isn't. It hasn't. But again, you know, sitting on the Old Girls Association is something I feel like I have to do, because it's not right that I left 18 years ago and girls are still going through what I went through at St. Andrews, you know. But then how do I fix it? I can only fix it from sitting on associations and influencing board decisions and things like that, you know. It is adversity, and it's adversity that actually should have no place in society. This shouldn't be the reality for young Black girls, for young Black boys, but it is. So then what? What are you going to do?
Any other questions for Natasha? Okay. Natasha, thank you so much. That was so beautiful.
Thanks, Allie. Yes, that is what it's called. Alicia Keys' book is called More Myself. Well done. Thank you.
All right. We are going to, hang on, here's another one from Jabalile. How do you choose your community? There's a nice one, Natasha.
Ooh. I may as well just talk about the whole of
community village.
Can I say, like,
yes,
actually speak the question, because I think when you listen to and when you read a lot of books and videos and audios, they always tell you choose the people around you. They always say if you aren't sitting with 10 geniuses, then chances are you aren't a genius. And it's like it's a large aspect of advice is like who's around you, and whether or not the people around you are planning, you know, these big things. Can you turn to them for this advice and that? And it sounds nice. It sounds like, oh, you know, all I need to do is choose people. And then you look around and it's like there aren't that many people to choose from, first of all. And it's difficult to build, you know, new relationships because you already have these people that you know, and they're not necessarily, according to the videos, they aren't the kind of people that you should choose around you. So I'd like a little more, like, a little more information on how you navigate. Okay, how is this person good for me, or do I only expose certain people to certain parts of my life? Or yeah, so that's my question, because I've heard choose your people a million times.
Yeah,
it's the option to choose them is different.
Choosing your people, choosing your village is a trial and error process for me, unfortunately. A few weeks ago, we were doing some mentor training, and I said that choosing your village is based on the fact that people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. you can be friends with someone who is your friend for whatever reason, and they may not necessarily be a good person to have in your life. But the only way you would know that you don't want this person in your village is from being in that person's face, you know? And then you sort of begin to learn what qualities you're looking for in a village member and what isn't beneficial to yourself. Through also platforms like G4G, you'll grow your village. You'll be exposed to people you weren't ever exposed to before and may not necessarily be in the future. And you never know where something like this will take you. I have lost friends along the way, and it's a part of life. I've lost family along the way, and not to like death, to the fact that our value systems don't align. And you'll learn more about value systems in the next session, in session 6. But it's important to figure out, and not to like this great existential degree, like who you are, but just what you stand for and what your boundaries are and what you're willing to compromise on to a certain degree and what you aren't. And, you know, some people are in your village differently for different purposes. So, for example, Guinea is my cousin, poor me, but she's also my friend. I've chosen her as a village member, not because we're blood relatives, but because I like what she brings into my life. She's a hardworking person, which I identify with. She's ambitious, which I identify with. And so we relate on that way, besides being cousins, but as a chosen village member. Your village is chosen. It's not your God-given village, your mother, your father, your sister, your whatever. It's who you choose to have in your life, either as a support structure, somebody to push you in your career, somebody to give advice. And they could be different roles for different people. It's still your village. It's not this one-dimensional thing that Val must be the person I call when I'm crying. She must give me advice when I need it. She must take my career forward. She must give me dating advice. No, one person is everything to one other person, but you have different village members for different reasons or seasons or for an entire lifetime. So choose your village. You'll figure it out eventually. Some people you meet immediately, your vibes don't connect, your auras, whatever you want to call it, your energies, you're just like, this person, not for me. Trust your gut. That person is not for you then. But other people will come into your life. They'll be here for as long as you're a G4G mentee or mentor, and then you'll never see them again. But they brought in whatever they brought in to your life for that moment, and it's great. Other people, maybe you love Mabato and you're like, oh, Mabato, the work that you do is so important. Can you help me further myself in this aspect? And then maybe Mabato's there in your life for forever. So your village comes with trial and error, but yeah, trust your gut in forming your village. And don't be hard on yourself. People will leave. It's fine. New people will come. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Could I add to Natasha? I think when we talk about choosing your village, yes, you have to be brave, which is one of the reasons we have courageous leadership as module number 2. We bring it in early. What is the worst that will happen to you if you ask Rita, please come and help me with this? The worst is that I will say no. That's a lesson for me that has worked in my life. My father always said to me, the worst that will happen is someone will say no. I will share a little story. Just this week, we talked about the fact that we want to have a gender-based webinar, gender-based violence webinar. We want to fight against it, want to speak up against it. And we thought to ourselves, well, one of the spokespersons is Miss Universe. And so, everyone's like, who's going to ask? And we thought to ourselves, what's the worst that will happen? She won't respond or she won't say no. So we've written the letter. You have to try. The point is, you have to keep pushing it and stepping out. That's the first point I wanted to make. The second is that when you get even 2 or 3 people in your corner, and they're here, like Mabato has put in the chat, this is already an opportunity, and I call it an opportunity for village. It becomes your village when you reach out and say, Mabatu, this Auntie Mabatu, this is how I want you to help me. Auntie Val, this is how I want you to help me. Miss Andiswa, this is how I want you to help me. You have to consciously reach out. When you have the first 2 or 3 people in your village, you become stronger, because Mabatu, Valerie's, Andiswa's village can easily become your village. Again, I'll give myself as an example. When I started Girls for Girls last year in 2019, April, we only had, Kini was one of the first people with me. We had, I think, 28 mentors, right? 28. Today in our database, we have 120 plus mentors in the G4G database. That is in just over a year. How did it happen? Because the first 28 women that we recruited, who we called our village, then brought their villages. So for me, I hope you get that that's a very clear way as to how you grow your village. If you take even 1 or 2 women, even mentees, they also become your sisters from here on. If you take 1 or 2 and turn them into your personal village, then it means that their village now can easily be tapped into. Once you tap into that second level of the village, the world is your oyster at the end of the day. But for me, the first step is trying. And yes, you might be scared. But like we said, Girls for Girls, do it scared. Do it afraid. Ask. The worst that will happen, they'll say no. But step up. Yeah?
I just want to add to that one story I always tell people. In university, I was able to finish early. And that's because I realized that I was going to stay a whole semester to do 1 class. And even though you had to do 1 class to get to the other class, I was like, this is ridiculous. I could be finished early. And literally, I thought to myself, all I have to do is ask. And I did it. So I did the 2 subjects simultaneously, and it worked out great. So it's something you have to consciously say to yourself, okay, I'm going to ask. And if they say no, we'll find another way.
I have to actually...
It's hard, but... Sorry?
I have to give you a great example. A friend of mine, Nyoko, is an advocate. In there where Auntie Fumutsu is, and Teresa and Jenny. And Yoko's 40, and she went to study in America, and she put herself through Smith College braiding hair. That's how she paid for her school fees. And when she came back to South Africa, she studied economics at Smith. When she came back, she went to UCT, and she did her honors, and then she convinced UCT that she'd be wasting her time doing a master's. They should let her go straight to PhD. Nyoko is about 2.5 feet tall. She's the tiniest person I've ever seen in my whole life. She is, possibly why she's an advocate, the smartest, but most convincing person. She's so persuasive in the way she communicates that she could convince an entire tertiary education institution that masters would be futile and she should go from honors to her PhD. And she did. She's a doctor of economics and also an advocate. And also. So the most you can do is ask. They can laugh and they can say no. But then what? You asked. But you won't know unless you ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Any other questions for Natasha? No. Natasha, thank you again. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you very, very much.
Very welcome. Thank you guys for listening.